The sound that ruined my life was not even that loud at first, just one gunshot on a quiet Saturday morning echoing off the houses on our street, and by the time I made it to the front door, my 10-year-old son in a wheelchair was already lying in the road with a cop's gun still pointed at him. It took my brain a second to understand what I was seeing because everything about that street in Ruston Ridge was familiar. The same cracked sidewalk, the same neighbor's maple tree, the same jogger who passed our house every weekend. But my boy, my Isaiah, was half in the gutter, half on the asphalt, his chair flipped over on its side like somebody had just knocked the world off balance. His yellow hoodie, the one with his favorite cartoon character on it, had a red stain blooming across the front, and his right hand was reaching toward the curb like he was still trying to grab the little blue action figure lying just shy of his fingers. For a moment, nobody moved. Not the neighbors frozen on their porches, not the jogger, not the officer standing there with his arms locked out and his gun still raised, and not even me, because when you see your child like that, your body kind of forgets how to act like a body. Then my wife Alicia screamed his name, this sound that didn't even sound human, and that finally knocked me loose. I ran barefoot into the street glass from the coffee mug I'd dropped crunching under my heel, but I didn't feel it all. I could see was our boy struggling to breathe, his chest hitching, eyes wide and wild, trying to find his mother in all that chaos. Alicia got to him first, dropped to her knees so hard I heard skin scrape the asphalt, her hands pressing into his chest like she could hold the blood in with sheer force of love. "Isaiah, baby, look at me. I'm right here. I'm right here," she kept saying, and he was trying. You could see him trying, his little arms shaking the way they always did because of his cerebral palsy, not because he was a threat to anybody. The officer Brent Maddox just stood there, his face red, his breath coming in short, jagged bursts. I remember his lips moving before I even really heard the words, like he had already switched into self-defense mode in his head. He reached for something. He kept repeating, voice cracking. He reached for something. I thought he had something. Only there was nothing near my son but a toy on the ground and that useless overturned wheelchair. A neighbor across the street had her phone up live streaming with hands that shook so bad the screen rattled. Another neighbor was yelling to call an ambulance. Somebody else was shouting at the cop, and the whole time Alicia's jeans were soaking through with our son's blood while she tried to keep him here with us. She looked up at Maddox, tears and snot and blood all over her face, and she said in this ruined voice, "He can barely lift his arms. He uses a wheelchair. What did you think he was reaching for? Hope." And I swear those words hit him harder than any fist could have. The sirens didn't sound far, but when you are watching your child die, the distance between here and the hospital feels like another planet, you know what I mean. Maddox finally fumbled for his radio, his hand still shaking. "Dispatch shots fired, child injured, requesting EMS now," he said, and you could hear how close he came to saying suspect out of habit. That one little stutter told me everything about how he saw my boy. Let me stop right here and tell you something about Isaiah, because he deserves to be more than a body on a street in your mind. Mornings in our house always started the same way. The squeak of his chair as he pushed himself into the kitchen, Alicia leaning over the stove making the chicken soup he loved even in the middle of summer, and me at the table pretending to read emails while I watched him narrate his favorite comic books. He had cerebral palsy, his muscles were tight, his hands shook when he tried to hold a pencil. Walking more than a couple of steps was not really an option, so that chair was basically his spaceship, his race car, his independence. He loved superheroes who had to choose to be brave, not the ones born invincible. Spider-Man was his favorite because Peter Parker didn't start strong. Dad, he had to decide. That is what he told me once, soup dribbling down his chin, grinning like he had just cracked the universe. We moved to Ruston Ridge because on the surface it looked like the kind of place where a black family with a disabled child might actually get a chance to breathe. Nice lawns, old barber shop that had been there since the 70s, a main street with a diner where people said morning even when they didn't know your name. What you don't see on the brochure is the way certain cruiser headlights slow down when black teenagers walk home from church, or the way some neighbors call you sir but talk to you like you're renting the house instead of owning it. The police department in town held on to their stop and frisk policy long after other places let it go. And funny enough, the people they stopped were always brown or black, walking too fast, too slow, too confident, too nervous. Whatever excuse fit the moment. I saw it all. What most of them didn't know was that I wasn't just some boring legal consultant like I told them. I am, or I was at the time, the Attorney General of the United States. The guy who signs off on federal civil rights investigations, who reads reports about police departments all over the country, who has seen every flavor of corruption dressed up in procedure. But I kept that part of me quiet in Ruston Ridge. I wanted Isaiah to have a childhood where his dad was just dad, not a face on the news, not a security detail in the driveway, not a walking reminder of how political his existence already was. So I watched that town the way I watch a jury, carefully, silently. And I noticed the way Officer Brent Maddox's eyes sharpened whenever he saw black kids who didn't flinch around him, the way complaints about his temper and his language kept disappearing into closed due to insufficient evidence. I took mental notes, told myself I would deal with it if I ever needed to, never imagining that if would look like my son bleeding in the street. By the time more units rolled up that morning, I had tucked the part of me the world knows behind a mask of stillness. Alicia was still bowed over Isaiah when Chief Randall Briggs stepped out of an SUV like he was arriving at a minor traffic jam. He didn't walk to my son. He didn't ask my wife anything. He went straight to Maddox. "What do we got?" he asked, the way you ask about a broken streetlight. Maddox repeated his line. He reached, "I thought he had a weapon, I feared for my life." And Briggs clapped him on the shoulder like a coach after a rough play. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. "Say you saw him reach, stick to the facts, you'll be fine." Meanwhile, 2 officers were trying to peel Alicia away from our son's body like she was the one disrupting their scene. "Ma'am, you need to calm down and step back," one of them barked. She didn't even seem to hear him. "My baby is right there, my baby is right there," she kept saying, fingers digging into the blanket over Isaiah's chest. "Ma'am, last warning, step back or we will restrain you." Hearing a cop threaten to restrain a grieving mother in front of her dead child, I felt something inside me lock into place. "Let her be," I said finally, my voice low. The officer turned on me with this look like I was an obstacle. "Sir, do not interfere," he snapped. And that was the moment I knew that if I pulled rank too early, if I flashed who I was, they would instantly shift into performance mode, tighten up every lie, polish every sentence. So I bit down on my anger and watched. I watched one officer walk over to the neighbor's porch, unscrew the camera that had been blinking during the shooting, and bag it, telling Alicia it was evidence that would be returned after review. I watched another nudge Isaiah's broken wheelchair with his boot and ask the chief, "Should we get this junk out of the road?" That word, junk, wrapped itself around my throat. I walked over, picked up a bent piece of the frame. It was thin, cold metal, but in my hand it felt like the spine of my son's life, and I knew right then that whatever came next, this little town had just turned itself into a federal crime scene, whether they realized it or not. What they didn't know yet, what I didn't even know until later that night, was that the teenager across the street had streamed the whole thing live. Her video hit the internet faster than any ambulance, bounced through group chats and timelines until people in cities we'd never been to were staring at my child on their screens. No weapon, no sudden lunge, no warning, just a disabled black boy in a hoodie dropping his toy, trying to move his shaking arms, and a cop who fired almost as soon as he saw fear in his own imagination. Ruston Ridge PD tried to pretend they were in control of the narrative, but you can't stuff that kind of truth back into a file cabinet once the world has seen it. That night, Alicia and I sat on the couch in clothes still stiff with dried blood, watching the video on her phone. She kept rewinding, watching the exact moment the bullet hit him and whispering, "He didn't move. He didn't do anything. Why are they lying like he scared him?" I couldn't answer, because the real answer is ugly and simple, and I've spent my career staring at it in case files. Some people see black bodies as threats, no matter what those bodies are doing. Sitting, walking, sleeping, or in my son's case, trying to pick up a toy from a wheelchair. There was a knock on the door that night, and for a second I thought it would be more cops trying to smooth things over. Instead, it was Detective Samuel Brooks' black, late 50s eyes that had seen way too much. He stepped inside like a man who knew he was breaking his own rules. "I shouldn't be here," he said, "but I'm tired of watching this department write fiction and call it procedure." He laid a folder on our coffee table, early versions of Maddox's incident report, internal emails, memos. The first draft said he fired in panic, wasn't sure what the boy did. The final one, submitted after a meeting with Chief Briggs, suddenly had "rapid movement toward waistband" and "non-compliance" sprinkled all over it like seasoning. That is how a lie is built, slowly in writing with other people's help. Later there was another knock, faster, more nervous. It was Officer Marcus Ruiz, the young cop I remembered from the scene, still in uniform, hands twisting his hat. "I saw what really happened," he blurted when I stepped onto the porch. He didn't give the kid any commands, he just fired, and now everyone keeps telling me to remember it different, say, I saw him reach, say I was scared too. I can't sleep, I see that boy's face every time I close my eyes. He looked at me a long second like he was trying to figure out why I was so calm. You don't react like other people, he said quietly. Who are you? There was a part of me that wanted to unload it right then. Tell him I signed the policies his department pretended to follow, that I could end his chief's career with one phone call, but I swallowed it. Just a father who lost his son, I told him. And for that night, that was the only truth I needed to stand on. The next day, the department rushed a press conference. You know the look. Flags behind the podium, polished words about tragedy and community. Briggs stood up there and called Isaiah's death a heartbreaking event, said Officer Maddox, responded according to his training, and asked the public to reserve judgment. Maddox's lawyer, this thin man with silver hair and the kind of confidence you only get from cashing a lot of checks on other people's pain, talked about my son being unattended and about split-second decisions. He did not say disabled once. He did not say wheelchair. He turned my child into a blurry figure in their story, the kind who appears right before a gun goes off and disappears as soon as the report is filed. Reporters started asking about the viral video, about the missing body cam footage, about why there was no mention of Isaiah's condition, and Briggs tried to shut it down. We will not be taking statements from the family at this time, he said. Something inside me snapped into place, then not rage exactly, more like a decision. I stood up in the back and started walking toward the front. An officer moved to block me at the rope. Sir, this is for authorized personnel only. I took off my baseball cap. Cameras swung in my direction and you could hear the room inhale. Someone near the front whispered my name like they weren't sure if they were really seeing me. You want an authorized person? I said, voice steady. You got one. My name is Elijah Walker, and I am Isaiah Walker's father. Silence hit that room harder than any shout. Then the recognition rolled through. Attorney General, federal power, all of it. Briggs visibly swallowed. Maddox looked like he had just realized he had stepped off a cliff and only now noticed the drop. I walked to the podium and didn't bother with introductions. Yesterday, I said, looking straight into the cameras, my 10-year-old son was shot and killed 50 feet from our front door. He had cerebral palsy. He could not run. He could not lunge at anyone. He died with a plastic action figure in his hand, and according to the story you've heard up here, that made him a lethal threat to an armed, trained police officer. I did not shout. I just laid it out the way I have laid out evidence before judges my entire career. You blamed my wife for not supervising him, I continued. You forgot to mention the wheelchair he needed to cross the street, the way his arms shook when he tried to pick up anything at all. You ask this town to reserve judgment while you quietly justify killing a child. That is not justice. That is a cover story. That moment became the twist the whole country latched onto. Racist cop kills disabled black boy, then learns the kid's father is the top law enforcement officer in the nation. Overnight, Ruston Ridge stopped being a quiet little town nobody had heard of and started trending like a battleground. I stepped back from the podium and the next morning signed off on something I had never imagined signing, with my own family at the center. A full-scale federal civil rights investigation into the Ruston Ridge Police Department. I recused myself from the day-to-day decisions, stayed out of meetings, let the career attorneys and agents do their work, because if this was going to mean anything, it could not look like I was settling a personal score. But make no mistake, I was watching. And what they found matched every instinct I had the first time I heard the word junk in that street. Missing disciplinary files for Maddox timestamps on exonerated reports that were dated before complaints were even filed. Locker room audio logs where he joked about reminding black kids who runs this town, and that text message he sent a few hours before the shooting. Wheelchair kid shouldn't be out here anyway. None of that brings my son back. But when you put it in front of a jury, alongside a live stream, alongside an honest rookie like Ruiz and an old detective like Brooks, who finally decides enough is enough, it changes the conversation from tragic accident to pattern and prejudice. The trial wasn't just the state versus Officer Maddox, not really. It was Maddox plus every person and policy that had protected him this long versus a little boy who couldn't even hold his arms steady. Alicia took the stand and told them who Isaiah really was. His love for comics, the way he named his own wheelchair superhero Steelheart. The fact that his muscles spasm when he gets excited, sure, but that nothing about him was fast or sudden enough to justify a bullet. The defense tried to twist, that tried to make it sound like those spasms might appear threatening. She looked that lawyer dead in the eye and said, "If a disabled 10-year-old boy moving his arms scares you, then you should not be wearing a badge or a gun." Ruiz testified that he never heard a warning, that he never saw a weapon, that he watched his colleague shoot a scared child. The union lawyer went after him, called him inexperienced, suggested he was bending the truth because of public pressure and a powerful family. You could see Ruiz wobble under that because he is human, but he did not break, and then Brooks came in with the one thing cops hate more than anything. Their own words played back to them. Hearing Maddox on that recording talk about scaring that wheelchair kid, and these people thinking they're bulletproof, changed the temperature in that courtroom. The jury stopped looking at him like a man who made a mistake and started looking at him like a man who finally got caught. They found him guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to 28 years. At sentencing, he stood up against his lawyer's advice and said what I had known in my bones since the second I saw him on that street. "I didn't think people like them mattered," he said. "Not I panicked. Not my training failed me. Just that. Isaiah's life was worth less than his comfort. That is the ugly core of it." Alicia folded into me, shaking not from shock but from the relief of finally hearing the truth said out loud where everyone could hear it. Now if this was a movie, this is where the music would swell and we'd all hug and somehow be healed. Real life doesn't work like that. Ruston Ridge did not magically become some post-racial town because one officer went to prison. There were folks who had defended Maddox right up until the evidence came out who now crossed the street to avoid us out of shame. And there were others who showed up on our doorstep with food and tears and stories about times they had stayed quiet when they shouldn't have. The department's old command structure got torn down. Their aggressive stop and frisk unit dissolved under federal pressure, new policies put in place. And in Washington, they named a bill after my son, the Isaiah Walker Accountability Act, aimed at tightening the rules that have let too many officers dodge consequences when unarmed civilians die. Some call it overreach, some say it doesn't go far enough. All I know is my boy's name is in the congressional record now and not just on a police report. A week after the sentencing, we held a community memorial in the park. No big stage, just a simple platform under an oak tree, a mica wreath, and Isaiah's wheelchair cleaned and polished sitting empty beside the podium. People came. Black, white, Latino, old, young cops and plainclothes kids from his school holding drawings of superheroes in wheelchairs. I walked up not as Mr. Attorney General, not in a government seal backdrop, just as a father. I told them Isaiah changed this town whether they were ready or not. That courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it shakes and stutters and rolls forward on squeaky wheels, but it shows up anyway. And I said something I've been turning over in my head ever since that first gunshot. Justice doesn't start when a judge reads a verdict. It starts the moment regular people decide they won't be quiet anymore when they see something wrong. So if you've listened to all of this, if you can still see that yellow hoodie in your mind, that broken wheelchair, that toy on the ground, I want to ask you for something. Not your sympathy. We have cried more than enough tears in this house, but your honesty. What does justice look like to you after something like this? Is a guilty verdict enough? Is a new law enough? Have you ever watched someone get treated like they didn't matter because of their skin, their body, where they live, and stayed quiet? Or did you step in? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think the system can really change or if you believe it is too broken. Tell your own stories if you have them. Because the only way Isaiah's name means anything now is if it pushes us to stop looking away the next time a kid like him is out there just trying to cross the street.